Some people have felt it for weeks. Others are only beginning to notice it now. A strange emotional distance, an unexplained heaviness, a growing sense that something in the world no longer feels the same. Conversations that once mattered suddenly feel empty. The constant noise of everyday life feels exhausting. And while everyone around you continues moving through the same routines, smiling, scrolling, pretending everything is normal, something deep inside keeps telling you that a major shift is approaching. Maybe you've felt it too. A quiet realization that you no longer belong to the version of life you once accepted. It's as if you're standing between two realities, one built on distraction, illusion, and endless noise, and another pulling you toward truth, silence, and awakening. This is where the separation begins. For years, the people often called the chosen ones have been experiencing an invisible transformation. Not because they are superior to others, but because they can no longer ignore what they feel within themselves. While much of the world remains focused on comfort, approval, and temporary distractions, these individuals are being pushed towards something far more difficult: honesty, awareness, and truth. And now, many believe May 21st represents a symbolic turning point. Not the end of the world, but the end of illusion. A moment where certain people finally realize they cannot return to who they once were. Because once you begin to see beyond the surface, once your soul starts rejecting the things that once kept you asleep, there is no going back. Some people will continue living exactly as they always have, but others will feel something irreversible awakening inside them. And after May 21st, the distance between those two paths may become impossible to ignore. The truth is, this separation did not begin overnight. It has been forming quietly for years beneath ordinary conversations, daily routines, and the illusion that everything was still the same. Long before people started speaking about spiritual awakening or energetic shifts, many individuals were already feeling an invisible distance growing between themselves and the world around them. At first, the signs were subtle. You stopped enjoying the things that once entertained you. The endless gossip, the fake smiles, the obsession with status, attention, and appearances began to feel empty. Conversations that used to last for hours suddenly sounded repetitive and lifeless. Places filled with noise and chaos started draining your energy instead of exciting you. Even certain friendships and relationships began to feel forced, as if you were trying to connect with people who could no longer understand the person you were becoming. And that realization can be deeply painful, because when awakening begins, it rarely arrives as peace in the beginning. More often, it arrives as discomfort. It forces you to notice how much of life has been built on performance rather than authenticity. You begin recognizing how many people suppress their emotions, ignore their intuition, and distract themselves to avoid confronting what they truly feel inside. And once you become aware of that pattern, it becomes impossible to fully participate in it again. This is why so many chosen ones feel isolated without knowing how to explain it. They are not physically alone all the time, yet emotionally, they feel separated from the environments around them. They can sit in crowded rooms and still feel disconnected. They can be surrounded by people and still sense an emptiness that nobody else seems to notice. It feels like existing on a completely different frequency. While the world becomes more obsessed with speed, distraction, and external validation, awakened individuals begin craving silence, truth, and depth. They start asking questions most people avoid. Why does modern life feel so spiritually empty? Why do so many relationships feel transactional? Why does society reward performance more than authenticity? These questions slowly create distance, not because awakened people believe they are better than others, but because their inner world is changing faster than their external environment. And eventually, that inner transformation starts affecting everything: friendships, careers, habits, priorities, even identity itself. Many relationships begin collapsing during this phase because they were only sustained by the old version of you. Some people were connected to your comfort, your silence, your people-pleasing, or your willingness to stay asleep beside them. But the moment you begin changing internally, the foundation of those relationships starts cracking. And perhaps the hardest part is realizing that not everyone wants to grow. Some people would rather protect familiar illusions than confront uncomfortable truths. They would rather remain emotionally numb than question the reality they have built their lives around. Meanwhile, the chosen ones continue changing whether they want to or not. They begin withdrawing from toxic environments. They become more protective of their energy. They stop forcing connections that no longer feel genuine. And even though this process can feel lonely, it also marks the beginning of something profound, the slow separation between those seeking distraction and those seeking truth. By the time May 21st arrives, many people will think this shift happened suddenly. But for the awakened, the divide has been forming for years. They have simply reached the point where pretending is no longer possible. Not every turning point in history arrives with chaos in the streets or dramatic signs in the sky. Some of the most important shifts happen quietly, deep within the human mind and spirit, long before the rest of the world recognizes that anything has changed. That is why dates like May 21st carry symbolic power. Not because the calendar itself is magical, but because certain moments become emotional and spiritual checkpoints, points where inner transformation reaches a level that can no longer be ignored. For many awakened individuals, May 21st feels less like a prediction and more like a culmination. A moment where years of emotional pressure, inner conflict, and silent awakening finally begin revealing themselves clearly. It is not about the end of the world. It is about the end of denial. And perhaps that is what makes this moment feel so intense. People everywhere are emotionally exhausted. Modern life has become a constant flood of stimulation, endless information, endless noise, endless distraction. Every day, people consume more opinions, more fear, more comparison, and more artificial connection than the human mind was ever meant to process. Yet despite all this activity, many feel emptier than ever before. That emptiness is significant, because beneath the entertainment, routines, and temporary pleasures, there is a growing spiritual fatigue spreading through society. More people are questioning their purpose. More people are feeling disconnected from themselves. More people are realizing that constant distraction cannot replace genuine meaning. But while society often notices these shifts only after they become visible, awakened individuals tend to sense them much earlier. They feel the tension before the collapse. They sense emotional shifts before conversations begin changing. They recognize the cracks in systems long before others admit they exist. This heightened awareness can feel both like a gift and a burden. On one hand, it allows them to see beyond illusions. On the other, it forces them to carry realizations that many people around them are not yet ready to confront. That is why symbolic dates matter so deeply to awakened people. They represent moments where internal truths become impossible to suppress any longer. Moments where the soul quietly says, enough. May 21st can therefore be understood as a threshold, not a supernatural deadline, but a psychological and spiritual crossing point. A moment where many people will suddenly recognize how disconnected they have become from the life they are living. Some will ignore that realization and return to distraction. But others will feel something irreversible awakening inside them. Because once clarity arrives, even briefly, the illusion never feels as convincing again. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is this. The world may appear unchanged on the outside after May 21st. The routines will continue. The noise will continue. The distractions will continue. But internally, many people will no longer experience reality in the same way. And that silent internal shift is where true transformation begins. There comes a moment in every awakening journey when a person realizes something terrifying and liberating at the same time. They can no longer return to who they used to be. At first, many chosen ones resist this realization. They try to reconnect with old routines, old relationships, and old versions of themselves. They attempt to fit back into conversations that once felt comfortable. They force themselves to tolerate environments that no longer align with their spirit. They tell themselves they are overthinking, becoming too sensitive, or imagining the distance growing between themselves and the world. But deep down, they already know the truth. Something inside them has changed permanently. Because awakening is not simply learning new ideas, it is seeing reality differently. And once certain truths are felt deeply enough, they cannot be unseen. Once the illusion breaks, the mind may try to rebuild it, but the soul refuses to believe in it again. This is why so many awakened individuals feel trapped between two identities. Part of them longs for the simplicity of who they once were, the comfort of ignorance, the ease of fitting in, the ability to move through life without constantly questioning everything. But another part of them has already crossed a threshold internally, and that part cannot go backward. It is like crossing a bridge that disappears behind you with every step. The further you awaken, the more difficult it becomes to tolerate anything false. Fake conversations become exhausting. Forced relationships feel unbearable. Environments built on negativity, manipulation, gossip, or superficiality begin affecting your energy almost immediately. Even your body starts responding differently. Crowded spaces drain you faster. Loud environments feel overwhelming. Certain people leave you emotionally exhausted after only minutes around them. And perhaps the hardest part is that others rarely understand what is happening to you. To them, you seem distant, quieter, more withdrawn, less willing to participate in the same distractions that once entertained you. Some may accuse you of changing too much. Others may believe you are becoming cold or disconnected. But what they fail to realize is that awakening often increases emotional sensitivity rather than removing it. Chosen ones feel more, not less. They notice hidden tension in conversations. They sense dishonesty behind smiles. They pick up emotional energy that most people ignore completely. Their intuition becomes stronger, sharper, and harder to silence. Sometimes they know something feels wrong long before evidence appears. Other times they instinctively pull away from people or situations without fully understanding why until much later. This heightened awareness can become exhausting. Because awakening is not a peaceful process in the beginning. It is an internal demolition. Old beliefs collapse, old coping mechanisms stop working, entire identities begin dissolving. The person you spent years becoming suddenly feels unfamiliar, incomplete, or spiritually dead, and that creates enormous inner conflict. Part of you wants to evolve. Another part fears losing everything familiar. You mourn relationships even when you know they are unhealthy. You miss versions of yourself that no longer exist. You question your own sanity during moments of loneliness. Some days you feel deeply connected to your purpose. Other days you feel completely lost between worlds. This is the hidden pain of transformation that few people talk about. Awakening often feels less like becoming someone new and more like shedding layers of someone you were never truly meant to be. Like a snake shedding old skin that has become too tight to contain its growth. The process is uncomfortable because the old identity resists dying, even when the soul knows it has outgrown it. And that is why so many chosen ones feel exhausted right now. They are rebuilding themselves internally while still trying to survive externally. They are grieving old versions of their lives while simultaneously stepping toward unfamiliar futures. Every day requires emotional energy because they are no longer operating on autopilot. They are questioning everything: their purpose, their relationships, their environment, even their understanding of reality itself. But despite the confusion, despite the loneliness, despite the fear, one truth continues becoming clearer. The old version of them cannot survive where they are going. And after May 21st, many chosen ones may finally stop trying to resurrect identities their souls have already left behind. One of the most painful parts of awakening is realizing that not everyone wants the truth, especially when that truth threatens the comfort of the world they have spent their entire lives building. Most people do not consciously choose illusion. They inherit it. From childhood, society teaches people how to behave, what to value, what success should look like, what emotions should be hidden, and which questions should never be asked too deeply. Over time, these patterns become normal. People stop examining their lives because routine feels safer than uncertainty. And that is where the conflict begins, because awakened individuals naturally disrupt that comfort simply by changing. The moment someone begins questioning the system around them, rejecting superficial values, or prioritizing truth over approval, they unintentionally challenge the people who remain attached to those things. Not through words alone, but through energy. A person who starts awakening often becomes harder to manipulate. They stop seeking validation from everyone around them. They become less responsive to guilt, fear, social pressure, and emotional games. They begin recognizing toxic patterns instead of excusing them. They notice dishonesty faster. They stop tolerating environments that drain their spirit, and people sense that shift immediately. Sometimes friends grow distant. Sometimes family members become defensive. Sometimes co-workers, partners, or entire social circles begin reacting differently without fully understanding why. The awakened person may suddenly face criticism for becoming too serious, too emotional, too different, or too withdrawn. But in reality, what others often resist is not the person, it is the discomfort their transformation creates. Because awakening forces reflection, and reflection can be threatening to people who have spent years avoiding their own inner emptiness. This is why awakened individuals frequently experience ridicule, gaslighting, or rejection during their journey. Not necessarily because others are evil or intentionally malicious, but because unconscious people often defend the reality that helps them feel emotionally safe. A sleeping person rarely appreciates being awakened suddenly. Imagine someone having a vivid dream for years, believing it is reality. Then another person shakes them and says, "Look closer." The immediate reaction is rarely gratitude. More often it is confusion, denial, anger, or fear. Not because the sleeping person is bad, but because waking up can feel terrifying. The same thing happens psychologically and spiritually. Many people remain attached to distractions because silence would force them to confront themselves. They remain attached to toxic relationships because loneliness scares them more than dysfunction. They continue chasing external validation because they have never learned how to feel worthy internally. And when someone nearby begins breaking free from those patterns, it unconsciously exposes the chains others are still living inside. That is why chosen ones often feel misunderstood. They are trying to evolve in environments that reward conformity. They are searching for authenticity in a world built on performance. They are attempting to protect their peace in systems designed to keep people distracted, emotionally reactive, and spiritually disconnected. Over time, this creates a painful realization. Not everyone can follow you into the next version of your life. Some people only understand the version of you that stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed agreeable, or stayed asleep beside them. The moment you begin changing, they may interpret your growth as rejection, even when you are simply trying to survive spiritually. And yet, despite the resistance, awakening continues. Because once consciousness expands, pretending becomes exhausting. The soul begins rejecting what the mind once accepted. The chosen ones start recognizing that much of the world operates on autopilot, repeating inherited beliefs, chasing temporary distractions, and avoiding uncomfortable truths simply because it feels easier than confronting them. Meanwhile, the awakened can no longer comfortably return to sleep. And that difference between those desperate to remain comfortable and those willing to face truth is what slowly creates the separation, now becoming impossible to ignore. Before every major transformation, there is usually a period of chaos. Not because life is falling apart without reason, but because the things no longer aligned with your growth begin breaking away all at once. This is what many awakened individuals describe as the purging phase, an intense emotional and spiritual clearing that often feels overwhelming while it is happening. And around May 21st, many people may begin experiencing this energy more strongly than ever before. For some, it may arrive emotionally. Old memories suddenly resurface without warning. Buried grief, anger, regret, or sadness that has been suppressed for years begins rising to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. Small situations trigger unusually deep emotional reactions. People who normally remain emotionally numb may suddenly find themselves crying, reflecting, or questioning everything about their lives. For others, the purge may appear mentally and spiritually. Vivid dreams become more frequent. Intuition feels sharper. Strange coincidences seem impossible to ignore. Some feel exhausted no matter how much they rest, while others experience periods of intense clarity followed by emotional heaviness. There is often a growing desire to withdraw from noise, distractions, and crowded environments. This can feel frightening at first, because the old version of life starts becoming unstable. Relationships suddenly end. Friendships grow distant. Career paths that once seemed important begin feeling meaningless. People lose motivation for routines they once followed automatically. Priorities shift rapidly, often without logical explanation. But transformation rarely feels comfortable while it is happening. Nature itself reflects this pattern. Storms clear the atmosphere. Forest fires destroy dead growth so new life can emerge. Even the human body experiences discomfort during healing and renewal. In the same way, spiritual transformation often requires emotional clearing before clarity can fully arrive. The problem is that many people mistake this phase for destruction instead of transition. When old identities begin collapsing, the mind naturally panics. It wants certainty. It wants familiarity. It wants to return to the known, even when the known was slowly suffocating the soul. That is why this period can feel emotionally exhausting. Part of you is trying to evolve, while another part is desperately trying to hold on to what no longer fits your spirit. And this is where grounding becomes essential. Awakening should never lead to paranoia, fear, or reckless decisions. Not every emotional wave is a supernatural sign. Not every ending is proof of destiny. Sometimes transformation simply means becoming more honest with yourself about what is healthy, authentic, and aligned with your well-being. During this phase, it is important to slow down rather than panic. Rest when your body asks for rest. Reflect before making impulsive choices. Spend time in silence. Disconnect from constant noise and overstimulation. Pay attention to your emotional state without becoming consumed by fear-based thinking. Because despite how chaotic this phase may feel, its purpose is not to destroy you. Its purpose is to remove what can no longer grow with you. And while the purging phase may feel lonely and confusing in the moment, many chosen ones will eventually realize that what they thought was falling apart was actually clearing space for the person they were becoming all along. As the world continues changing externally, something even more significant is happening beneath the surface of human consciousness. A silent division is taking place, not between nations, races, or social classes, but between two fundamentally different ways of experiencing reality itself. This is the Great Split, and for many chosen ones, May 21st represents the moment this separation becomes impossible to ignore. On one side are those still living entirely through unconscious survival. Their lives are driven by routine, distraction, fear, social conditioning, and the constant need for external validation. Every decision revolves around comfort, approval, status, or temporary escape. Their attention is consumed by endless noise, entertainment, conflict, comparison, and superficial pursuits designed to keep the mind occupied but never truly fulfilled. On the other side are those moving toward conscious evolution. These individuals are beginning to question everything they once accepted automatically. They no longer want a life built only on survival. They crave meaning instead of distraction, truth instead of performance, inner peace instead of constant stimulation. They are becoming more aware of their thoughts, emotions, habits, and spiritual condition. And because of that awareness, they can no longer participate in the world with the same blindness as before. This is why two people can exist side by side, work in the same building, live in the same city, even share the same home, yet experience completely different realities internally. One person may spend every day chasing distractions to avoid silence. The other may seek silence because they have discovered that truth only becomes clear when the noise fades away. One person may define success entirely through money, attention, or status. Another may begin realizing that no external achievement can compensate for inner emptiness. One person reacts to fear by clinging tighter to comfort and conformity. Another allows fear to become the doorway to growth, reflection, and transformation. This is the invisible split happening now. And the frightening part is that many people do not even realize which path they are on. Modern society conditions people to stay externally focused at all times. Constant stimulation keeps individuals disconnected from themselves. Endless comparison prevents self-awareness. Fear keeps people obedient. And conformity rewards those who never question the systems surrounding them. But awakening disrupts that cycle. Chosen ones begin noticing how often people operate on autopilot, repeating inherited beliefs, suppressing emotions, chasing approval, and avoiding deep reflection simply because slowing down would force them to confront uncomfortable truths about their lives. And once you see that pattern clearly, it changes the way you view everything. Suddenly, the world begins feeling divided between those trying to escape themselves and those trying to discover themselves, between those who numb their pain and those willing to heal it, between those who perform identities for society and those searching for authenticity, even when authenticity costs them relationships, comfort, or certainty. This is why awakening can feel so lonely. Not because chosen ones are physically isolated from humanity, but because they begin perceiving reality through an entirely different lens. They start valuing depth in a culture obsessed with appearances. They prioritize peace in a world addicted to chaos. They become intentional while others remain reactive. And over time, this creates two psychological realities existing simultaneously in the same world. One reality is built on distraction, fear, and unconscious repetition. The other is built on awareness, transformation, and purpose. The deeper question is no longer what is happening in the world. The deeper question is, who are you becoming within it? When nobody is watching, what drives your life? Fear or purpose? Comfort or growth? Approval or authenticity? Are your choices truly yours, or are they inherited patterns you never stopped to question? Because the great split is not ultimately about separating people from each other. It is about separating people from the illusions controlling them. And by the time May 21st arrives, many individuals may finally recognize that the path they choose now will shape not only their future, but the person they ultimately become. One of the most misunderstood parts of awakening is isolation. Many chosen ones experience periods where relationships fade, social circles shrink, and life becomes unexpectedly quiet. At first, this can feel painful, even frightening. The mind immediately interprets separation as rejection. It wonders why connections suddenly feel distant, why conversations no longer resonate, and why being around certain people feels emotionally exhausting instead of comforting. But what if isolation is not punishment? What if it is preparation? Throughout history, nearly every person associated with wisdom, transformation, or spiritual insight passed through a season of solitude. Seekers withdrew from the noise of society to understand themselves more deeply. Philosophers spent long periods alone questioning the nature of existence. Hermits, mystics, and visionaries separated themselves from distraction because silence allowed them to hear truths the world constantly drowns out. And that same pattern appears during awakening journeys today. Because when life becomes too noisy, it becomes difficult to hear your own inner voice. Constant opinions, expectations, social pressures, and distractions pull people away from themselves. Most individuals spend their entire lives reacting to external stimulation without ever truly understanding who they are beneath it all. Isolation interrupts that cycle. It creates space for reflection, space for healing, space for clarity. This is why many chosen ones suddenly feel drawn towards solitude during periods of transformation. It is not always because they hate people or want to disconnect from humanity. Often, their spirit simply becomes exhausted by environments that no longer align with who they are becoming. And in that silence, something powerful begins happening. Intuition grows stronger. The constant emotional static begins fading. Thoughts become clearer. Feelings become easier to understand. Hidden truths rise to the surface. Many people notice they begin recognizing patterns they ignored for years. They become more aware of which relationships drain them, which habits numb them, and which environments keep them disconnected from themselves. Silence amplifies awareness. That is why loneliness and sacred solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is the painful feeling of being emotionally disconnected and abandoned. Sacred solitude, however, is intentional separation for growth, healing, and self-discovery. One empties the spirit, the other restores it. At first, the transition between the two can feel confusing. Many awakened individuals move through both emotions at different stages. Some nights feel deeply peaceful, others feel unbearably isolated. But over time, many begin realizing that this temporary distance from others is helping them reconnect with themselves in ways they never could before. Because transformation often requires stepping away from environments that constantly reinforce the old version of you. And while the world teaches people to fear being alone, awakening reveals something different. Some of the most important discoveries in life happen in silence. Not when the crowd is speaking, but when the noise finally disappears long enough for you to hear your own soul clearly. So if life has felt unusually quiet lately, if relationships are changing, if you feel separated from the world around you, do not immediately assume something is wrong. Sometimes isolation is not life abandoning you. Sometimes it is life creating space for the person you are becoming. Awakening means nothing if it never transforms the way you live. This is the point many people misunderstand. Spiritual awareness is not meant to become another identity, another label, or another excuse to feel separate from the world. The purpose of awakening is not to escape reality, it is to face reality more consciously than before. And that is why the chosen ones must now move beyond realization and into responsibility. Because once you begin seeing clearly, your choices matter differently. You can no longer endlessly ignore your mental health while pretending everything is fine. You can no longer stay trapped in environments that slowly destroy your spirit. You can no longer abandon your purpose for temporary comfort and distraction. Awakening demands action. Not reckless action driven by emotion, but intentional action guided by clarity. This is where discipline becomes essential. Not punishment, not perfection. Discipline simply means learning how to protect your energy, focus your mind, and remain connected to yourself even when the world around you becomes chaotic. Many awakened individuals spend years searching for meaning externally while neglecting the small daily habits that actually stabilize transformation internally. True growth requires grounding. It means taking care of your body even during emotional exhaustion. It means creating routines that support your mental clarity. It means learning emotional regulation instead of allowing every emotion to control your behavior. Awareness without self-control quickly turns into confusion, anxiety, and emotional instability. And this is especially important during periods of intense transformation, because the more sensitive you become emotionally and spiritually, the more important boundaries become. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy, your attention, or your inner world. Some environments drain you. Some relationships keep pulling you back into older versions of yourself. Some people only understand you when you remain small enough to fit their expectations. The chosen ones must learn discernment. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every emotional reaction is truth. Not every person speaking confidently is spiritually aware. Awakening requires learning the difference between intuition and fear, between wisdom and ego, between genuine connection and emotional dependency. And perhaps most importantly, awakening is not superiority. This is where many people lose themselves. The moment spiritual awareness becomes a reason to feel above others, the awakening itself becomes distorted. The chosen ones are not called to become arrogant, isolated, or self-righteous. They are called to become more conscious, more compassionate, and more authentic. Because true awakening humbles you. It reveals how much healing still remains. It forces you to confront your own patterns, wounds, fears, and contradictions. It teaches you that growth is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming honest. And honesty changes everything. It changes the way you speak, the way you love, the way you spend your time, the way you respond to conflict, the way you create your future. That is why many chosen ones eventually feel pulled toward creativity, purpose, and mission-driven living. Once superficial distractions lose their hold, the soul naturally begins searching for meaningful expression. Some people begin writing. Others start creating art, helping others, building communities, changing careers, or finally pursuing the calling they spent years ignoring. Because awakening is ultimately about alignment. It is about becoming internally connected enough that your outer life finally reflects your inner truth. And as May 21st approaches, many chosen ones may realize that this next chapter is not simply about understanding the shift happening around them. It is about deciding who they will become because of it. Will they retreat back into distraction and fear? Or will they finally begin building a life that reflects the person they know they were meant to become? In the end, the greatest realization is this: the separation was never truly about the world outside of you. It was always happening within. For so long, many people believed the divide would appear as some dramatic external event, a visible line between one group and another, a sudden transformation everyone could immediately recognize. But the deeper truth is far more personal and far more unsettling. The real separation is consciousness. It is the difference between living unconsciously and living awake, between blindly repeating inherited patterns and intentionally questioning them, between choosing comfort at any cost and choosing truth even when truth changes everything. That is why two people can stand in the exact same world while experiencing completely different realities internally. One may continue moving through life asleep, distracted, emotionally disconnected, constantly seeking external validation to avoid confronting themselves. The other may feel an increasing need for meaning, authenticity, and inner alignment, even if that path requires loneliness, sacrifice, or uncertainty. And May 21st does not create that difference. It simply exposes it. Like light entering a dark room, it reveals what was already there all along. The exhaustion people have been suppressing, the emptiness hidden beneath routine, the quiet awareness that many have outgrown the lives they continue pretending to enjoy. For the chosen ones, this realization becomes impossible to ignore because their souls are no longer willing to live divided between who they are and who they pretend to be. That is the true awakening. Not becoming special, not becoming superior, but becoming honest. The chosen ones are not defined by perfection, status, or mystical power. They are defined by their willingness to confront themselves truthfully. They are the people who finally stop running from the uncomfortable questions, the people willing to acknowledge their wounds instead of hiding them behind distractions, the people brave enough to admit when a life, relationship, or identity no longer aligns with who they are becoming. And that honesty changes a person permanently. Because once you begin seeing yourself clearly, the old version of your life becomes impossible to fully return to. The masks feel heavier. The pretending becomes exhausting. The soul starts rejecting environments, habits, and relationships that once felt normal because internally something fundamental has shifted. This is why awakening often feels like grief before it feels like freedom. You mourn the old identity even while outgrowing it. You miss the comfort of not questioning everything. You remember the version of yourself that could tolerate emotional numbness, shallow distractions, or empty connections without feeling spiritually drained. But eventually, you realize something important. The old version of you was surviving. The new version of you is trying to live truthfully. And there is a profound difference between the two. That is why the separation feels irreversible now. Not because the world suddenly changed overnight, but because awareness changed the way you experience the world itself. Once consciousness expands, reality cannot be viewed through the same lens again. The chosen ones are simply those who accepted that transformation instead of resisting it. Those who understood that awakening is not about escaping humanity, but about becoming fully present within it. Those willing to leave behind identities built on fear, performance, and survival so they could finally step into authenticity. And perhaps that is the true meaning of May 21st. Not the end of the world, but the end of imitation. The moment where many people finally realize that the life they were trying to preserve no longer reflects who they truly are becoming. Maybe that is why so many people feel different right now. Not broken, not completely lost, but deeply changed in ways they cannot fully explain. For years, the signs have been building quietly beneath the surface. The emotional exhaustion, the growing disconnection from superficial relationships, the strange feeling that the old way of living no longer makes sense. Many people tried to ignore it. Some distracted themselves from it with noise, routines, and endless stimulation. Others kept forcing themselves to remain connected to environments their souls had already outgrown. But awakening has a way of becoming impossible to silence forever. And now, as May 21st approaches, many chosen ones are beginning to understand that this transformation was never suddenly arriving from outside of them. It has been unfolding internally for years. Every painful ending, every season of loneliness, every moment of confusion, every time life forced them to question who they truly were, all of it was leading to this realization. The separation was already happening within. Some people will continue chasing distraction because silence forces them to confront themselves. Others will keep repeating familiar patterns because uncertainty feels more frightening than emotional numbness. But there are also those who can no longer pretend their spirit is satisfied with survival alone. Those people are stepping onto a different path, not a perfect path, and certainly not an easy one, but a conscious one. So if you have felt unusually reflective lately, emotionally exhausted, disconnected from old versions of yourself, or strangely distant from the world around you, maybe you are not losing yourself at all. Maybe you are finally beginning to see clearly. And perhaps the most important question is no longer whether May 21st changes the world. The real question is, what has already changed within you? What no longer feels aligned in your life? Which habits, relationships, or environments feel impossible to carry into the next chapter of your journey? And what part of yourself has been trying to emerge beneath all the noise, fear, and distraction surrounding modern life? Take a moment to reflect honestly on that. And if this message resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you felt this shift happening too? Do you believe this separation between awareness and unconsciousness is already unfolding? What has changed most deeply inside you over the past few years? Because one truth is becoming impossible to ignore. Some people will spend the rest of their lives trying to return to comfort and familiarity, but the chosen ones were never meant to remain asleep forever. May 21st is not the moment the transformation begins. It is the moment many finally realize that the transformation has already begun within them.